Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 21st part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 42, Love. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Day 6. Izuku woke up in a hospital bed. Honestly, he should be concerned about how often that happens to him now. But he can't be bothered. He was too busy feeling relieved that he's in a bed and not in a heap on the floor. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. The room was slowly filling with soft morning light. It was a large room, and he wasn't alone. Dad and Yagi were both in hospital beds across from him. They were out cold, their arms hanging off the beds. They must have fallen asleep holding hands. That was going to be odd. Them together. Izuku was more than fine with it. They were both wonderful people. He wished he had his phone. He'd have to ask about it. The last time he had it was at the training camp. Fuck. That had only been 3 days ago. It felt like a lifetime. His entire body hurt. His arm, his ribs, his face. They had him on an 4 drip because he'd been dehydrated. His stomach was growling. This entire ordeal had been awful. He didn't want to ever think about it again. Not about All for One. He was in prison now. Thanks to All Might, oh God, All Might. It was Izuku's fault. He'd been captured because he was too stupid and too weak to prevent it. And All Might had spent the last of his one for all getting him home safe. Tears gathered in the corners of his eyes. All Might was done. It was his turn now. Izuku wouldn't waste it. He'd work harder, get stronger. All Might had held the world up on his shoulders like Atlas, and done it all with a smile. He held it for years. Izuku could do that. He could handle it. He wouldn't crack. He'd be stronger. Izu. Dad asked. He sat up slowly. He looked better today than he had when they'd met at the hospital late last night. He'd been hurt pretty badly when All for One had thrown him across the field. What are you doing up? Izuku shrugged. Just woke up. Dad pulled himself out of his hospital bed and walked to Izuku, gently slipping into the bed with him. See Mir, he said. Izuku made room for him and allowed his father to pull him close. I'm so happy to have you back, he said softly. He ran his fingers through Izuku's hair, pushing it off his face. Izuku's body relaxed, inhaling the smell of the campfire. I'm so sorry, Izuku. This shouldn't have happened. But it did, Izuku said. I'm not mad, he added. I mean, I am, but not at you. At All for One. At Shigaraki. The universe. Izuku laid his head down on his father's chest. It happened and now we have to deal with it. The arms around him tightened. We're gonna be okay, Dad said. He's gone now. I can't believe you were going to give yourself up. Dad sighed. There wasn't another choice at the time. He was holding you hostage. I wasn't about to let you get hurt. Without you, Izuku, I wouldn't be able to take it. What about me? What am I supposed to do without you? What about Yagi-san? He asked. He loves you. I'm sorry, Izuku, Dad said softly. Yet. He does love me, doesn't he? He chuckled softly, lifting his head to look at Yagi. We haven't talked about what that means yet. Izuku glared up at his father lightly. It means you should be together, obviously. It's not that simple. Of course it is. You both feel the same way. You're good together, you make each other happy, and we're about to move in with him. You should just be together, Izuku said stubbornly. The world knows he's All Might. His powers are. He trailed off. Point is, Yagi-san needs support right now. We all need support. We're a family, even if you don't get together. So, just make it easier and stop denying yourselves something you clearly want and just go for it. What's the worst thing that'll happen? Because we've already hit rock bottom. Dad hummed. I suppose we have, he sighed in defeat. We still need to have a talk. Figure out what it is we want. Besides, We kissed on live television. I doubt the world is just going to let that go. Izuku blinks. Yet. Oh god, Dad, you kissed All Might on live TV. After his final fight. It's probably all over the news. It's probably the only news, he said. This entire debacle has been in the news, Dad said. You were all over it. After you got kidnapped, the school faced a lot of criticism. It's not exactly unwarranted. Aizawa, Vlad, and the Wild Pussycats failed to keep you safe, he said. UA failed to keep you safe. It allowed a leak, and the villains to come in and steal you. I'm not exactly thrilled either, he sighed heavily. But I know the only person to truly blame is myself. He shook his head. Dad, no. The person behind this is All for One. They found the camp because of something he did. He has all those quirks, who knows how he found us. We think there's a spy, Dad cut him off. I'm telling you because I know you're clever. The spy may be a student, he smoothed the hair off of Izuku's bandaged forehead. I don't want you to mistrust any of your friends, but please keep your eyes open. Be careful who you trust. Izuku gasped. A spy? Do you think it's one of my classmates? Dad shrugged. We don't know. All we do know is that this is twice the league got information that only people at the school should have known. It could be a staff member or someone in a different course. It could even be an upperclassman. We don't know, so just keep one ear to the ground, okay? There was something in his voice that suggested he knew more, but Izuku wasn't going to push. Not now. Well, we know 5 people we can trust, Izuku said with a smile. I can't believe they came to rescue me. He thought of Shoto first. The way he'd held him so tightly last night. He was sure that once visiting hours were open he'd be barging the door down. Kaken had come too. Okako and Ida. And Shinso saved his father's life. We gotta get Shinso something. Yeah, Dad said with a chuckle. He really saved me. I'll have to thank him properly. You two are up early, Yagi said. He was sitting up in his bed, watching them with a small smile. He looked terrible and was covered in bandages. Dad's eyes softened. Sorry, Tosh, did we wake you? He shook his head. It's fine, he grunted as he pulled himself from the bed. Yagi limped his way over to Izuku's bed, grabbing a chair and pulling himself close to Dad's side. He leaned his elbows onto the bed. So, Izuku, how are you? Not great, Izuku admitted. I don't think I'll ever be the same after this. No, Yagi said quietly. Probably not. But that's not inherently a bad thing. This was a terrible and painful experience. For all of us, but especially you. However, you gained something in all of this. After my toughest defeats, I find ways to move forward. We learn from the things that happen to us. Our failures, and the failures of those around us. Izuku, I failed you. Izuku sat up from the bed. No. Yagi-san, you didn't fail me at all. This isn't your fault. Dad shook his head. No, he's right. This is our fault, he pushed himself up. You're. He glanced at Yagi before smiling at Izuku softly. You're our kid. We're supposed to protect you, that's our entire job and we fucked it up. And you had to suffer those consequences. But I will do everything in my power to never fail you again. I'm the same, Izuku, Yagi said. You're my successor. Beyond that, I've come to see you as a son. Especially now that I'll never be able to be All Might again, everything I have will now be devoted to you, Izuku gasped. Please, allow me to give you my all. Allow me to raise you into a fine young hero and man. Tears pricked Izuku's eyes. Yagi-san, Yagi reached over his father, to cup Izuku's face. His thumbs gently wiped away his tears. Izuku, if you'd like you can call me by my given name. A quiet sob escaped Izuku. He reached out with his better arm and used pull to bring Toshinori close to hug him tightly around his neck. Oh okay Toshinori. He buried his face into his neck. Warm arms wrapped around his back. Toshinori clung to him tightly. His father's hand was pressed against his back as well. I accept. They pulled apart, and Toshinori looked at his father. Hisashi, I know there's still so much we need to talk about. Understatement of the year, Dad said. His eyes were watering as well. Will you allow me to raise your son with you? Dad laughed. Tosh, you've been doing it for years already. He wrapped an arm around Toshinori, pulling him in until their foreheads bumped together. I told you. We're a family. No matter what we decide, I'm still going to be in your life. I promise. Izuku grabbed them both, crying hard. God, he loved his parents. Throughout the day, doctors came in and visited. His arm was in pretty bad shape. Being broken for days on end without any kind of treatment had made it worse than it had been when he'd initially broken it. But he would make a recovery. Izuku already had plans on how to help keep his arms safe. Other than his right arm, which he'd have to be extra careful with, he'd be fine in just a few days. Dad and Toshinori would also be fine. It was 12 on the dot when the hospital door slammed open. Shoto was in the doorway. Izuku, he said, his eyes landing on him. Kiken was right behind him. The two tried to push their way into the room, their shoulders bumping. Get off Bakugo, Shoto snapped before pushing past him. Izubunny. Shoto ran to his side, stopping just short of the bed. Hi Shao-chan, Izuku said, smiling up at him. He took Shoto's hands gently. Thank you, he said. You came to rescue me, thank you so much. I love you, Shoto said. Izuku gasped. Dad, Toshinori, and Kiken all stood still. It was like time had stopped in the hospital room. Shoto loved him? Shoto loved him? Tears welled in his eyes, blurring his vision. Izuku shot up onto his knees and scrambled to Shoto. He didn't care if people were watching. He grabbed him by the face and kissed him deeply. I love you too, he said, pulling back. Shoto wrapped his arms around his back, pulling him in close. I was so scared that whole time, he whispered. All I could think about was how much I loved you and how I was so angry that you didn't know. That I couldn't tell you. Izuku buried his face into his neck. I love you so much. I'm pretty sure I've been in love since you told me it was my power, he said. I've always loved you, Izuku. I'll never stop, not ever. Kiken smacked Shoto upside the head. Are you two done? He snarled. Shoto gave Izuku one last kiss before pulling back. Not really, but go ahead. He let go of Izuku and moved out of Kiken's way. Izuku expected him to yell. Call him a dumbass Deku. Chastise him for getting captured. Maybe tell him to get better. What Izuku did not expect was two warm arms to be wrapped around him. Kiken buried his face into Izuku's hair and squeezed him tightly. Don't ever do that again. He pulled back and stepped away as if he'd been burned. That never happened. If you tell anyone, I'll kill you. He turned towards his parents. That goes for you chucklefucks as well. Shoto sat on Izuku's bed. Speaking of. Shoto looked between the three of them. What exactly is going on? Are the others coming? Izuku asked. Later. The hospital is only allowing you guys to have 2 visitors at a time, Shoto explained. Izuku nodded. Right. Okay. He looked to his parents. How do we want to start this? He looked back to Shoto and Kiken. Actually, ask questions and we'll answer them. No more lying. Not to you guys. That sound fair? He asked that last bit to his parents. The secrets are yours to keep, Izuku, Toshinori said. You're the one who decides what happens. Tell them as much or as little as you like. We'll support you. Right, Izuku nodded. Ask away. Kiken was first. Uncle is a clone? He asked. It's more complicated than that, Dad said. I'm a series of memories given a living form. My own separate person. All for one, and I used to be the same person. Shoto took Izuku's hand, his thumb rubbing soothing circles into the back of his hand. Who exactly is All for One? He's a villain, Dad explained. When I was born, I had a quirk called All for One. It allowed me to take quirks, use them, and give them away as I saw fit. Just like Izuku can. I used that power for evil. I had convinced myself I was a god among men. That because the world had been unkind to me, that was odd. The world had been unkind to Dad? I could take whatever I wanted, and there was no one who could stop me. Eventually, I found a quirk that stopped me from aging entirely. For 200 years I've lived as All for One, until a few years ago. All Might came to stop me. In that battle, he injured All for One greatly. As a form of self-preservation, a quirk I had picked up activated. It split me into two beings and split my memories across the two bodies. I got all of my happiest and saddest memories. Kaken and Shoto nodded along, though both of them seemed rather stunned. Then you met Izuku's mom? No. He said quietly. I met Izuku's mother many years before I was split. Inko was, well, she loved me. I loved her. We had Izuku. I didn't see them. Then, when you suddenly showed up, Kaken asked, that was after the split? Correct, Dad said. It was. A long moment passed as they each mulled over the new information. Shoto's hand was tense in his. Izuku squeezed it gently. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this, he said softly. I wanted to. I did. Shoto looked at him. Izuku, it's okay. I won't lie. This is a lot. I'm not angry though. Just surprised. You've been dealing with all of this all by yourself? He asked. Izuku smiled. No. I've got Dad and Toshinori. Toshinori, you mean? Shoto asked, his eyes moving to Toshinori. That's the next thing. Yagi-san and All might have been the same person. Kaken glared at Toshinori. This entire time. He growled. You motherfucker. I gave you my mom's banana bread recipe and you lied to me about being All Might for years? He rounded on Izuku. And you? Your dad has been dating All Might and you hide it from me. They aren't dating, whoops, sorry, reflex. Well. No, that's still true. They aren't dating yet. Speaking of, get on that, he said to his parents. Anyway. We didn't know he was All Might until God like a year ago. He said. Remember when I got into that slime incident? Back in middle school. Kaken nodded. Well, that was when I found out. He saved me. We were meeting up for training A&D. The villain appeared. I tried to save him since I thought he was quirkless and injured. But he ended up saving me instead. Izuku smiled. After that, we were let in on his secret. In return, Dad and I shared ours. You were attacked by a villain in middle school. Shoto asked softly, it's like you're a magnet. Did you pick up a villain magnet quirk? It's like you pull them in. Izuku sighed, no. I didn't. You're as bad as my dad. Quit running into villains then, why don't you? Dad teased. Kaken cut in, okay. So, just to make sure I fucking have everything. You, he pointed at Dad. Are some weird quirk clone of All for One. All for One, who is a 200-year-old supervillain with a quirk of the same name that takes and gives quirks. He turned to Izuku. And you are his son. You inherited this fuck you powerful quirk. Finally, he turned toward Toshinori, and you have a transformation style quirk with a tiny form and a huge form. No, Toshinori said. No, this is a long story. One that we're actually only going to share with the two of you. Please don't let this next information leave this room, he said finally. I had a quirk called One for All. Kaken covered his face with his hands. What the fuck do you mean you had a quirk called One for All? Isn't that close to Izuku's quirk in name? Shoto asked. Toshinori nodded. It was meant to be. Hisashi had a younger brother. Oh. Izuku yelled suddenly. I saw the vestiges again. First at the training camp and again when All for One was torturing me. Torture. Several voices asked at once, but Izuku was not ready to talk about that in depth yet, so he opted to ignore them and continue on. While that was happening, we were kind of in a mutual All for One void. Dad, you know what I mean, right? The swirly void where all the quirks are? The headspace. Everyone else seemed confused, but Dad gave a quick nod. Yes, the quirk void, we've all seen it. While we were there he was torturing me and Uncle Yoichi was there. As a vestige. He saved me. Oh. And he says he misses you too. He told me that while I was under Shinso's quirk at camp. Dad practically sprang out of his bed. What? He sputtered and ran to Izuku's side. He did. Yes. Izuku grabbed his dad by the wrist. He did. He misses you. He misses me. What the fuck is a vestige and what do you mean had All Might? Kaken yelled, breaking the two of them out of their reverie. Toshinori sighed. One for All was the quirk that belonged to Hisashi's younger brother Yoichi. Dad took over, wiping the tears from his eyes. We thought Yoichi was quirkless. When I was young and rising into power, my sickly quirkless brother fought against me. I kept him locked up, and out of the way. I even forcibly gave him a quirk. A relatively weak power stockpiling quirk. But, it turned out Yoichi wasn't quirkless. He had an invisible quirk that allowed him to pass his quirk on. After I gave him this strength stockpiling quirk, they merged into what we now call One for All. Toshinori stepped back in. One for All is a quirk that has had its power grow and passed down like a torch, compounding strength from one user to the next. Each time it passes through a user, it becomes stronger and stronger. The strength continues to compound and crystallize into ultimate power and strength. I'm the 8th wielder of One for All. He paused. And Izuku is the 9th. Shado's grip tightened on his hand. Kiken stood up in shock. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. We're pretty sure that's why my All for One is a bit different now. Shadow, remember how me taking your quirk made it stronger? And more volatile? Shadow nodded, seemingly stunned into silence. Well, we're pretty sure it's because it was exposed to 8 previous generations of stockpiled power. What? Wait. Kiken pointed at Toshinori again. So, you saw Deku, knew he had a godlike quirk, and said hey, you know what's better than one godlike quirk? 2 godlike quirks. He motioned to Izuku. And you gave it to Deku. Toshinori nodded. I did. Izuku has a hero's true spirit. Shadow nodded as well. I agree, he said. This is so much. He leaned forward until his forehead rested on Izuku. But I agree. Izuku is the most heroic person I know. Shao-chan. He smiled, pulling his boyfriend closer. Is there any other surprise secret identity or overpowered quirk or Star Wars level family reveal we need to worry about? Kiken asked, because I am sick of this. The fight with All for One used up the last of my power, Toshinori said. I'm going to have to retire. I'm quirkless again. For once, the only person in the room to cry was Kiken. The others took it about as well as Shadow and Kiken had, which is to say, they were shocked. Everyone had agreed to keep it a secret. After all, the only secret that was out to the world was that All Might was powerless and retiring. Tiger and Mount Lady had been unconscious during most of the fight. The only person who had seen everything and not been talked to was Best Jeanist, and he was currently in a coma, so there wasn't much they could do on that front. At some point, Dad had Izuku retrieve Blood Curdle from him. It was now back in Izuku's possession. Eventually, they were all discharged from the hospital. Some new scars and traumas, but they were alive. They would survive. Now they were at the apartment, packing up more of the house. Izuku sat in his bedroom, piling his notebooks into a cardboard box. Dad and Toshinori were packing in another room. They still hadn't talked, which was frustrating beyond belief. They'd been out of the hospital for almost 3 days. It was time. Izuku was this close to locking them both in a closet and not letting them out until they figured it out. He just couldn't, for the life of him, understand what the holdout was. He closed his box and picked it up. He left his room, and Dad and Toshinori were in the living room. Dad was packing up all the DVDs they'd like to bring, while Toshinori was nursing a cup of tea. Izuku could smell the lemon in it from here. He stopped in the entrance and stomped his foot. Hey, he said, are we loading the truck or just making piles? Dad looked over. Did you just stomp your foot at me? Izuku blinked. I did. He asked. He had, hadn't he? Sorry, didn't mean to. Just, sort of did it. That made Dad pause. Didn't you pick up a new quirk? He asked. You turned into a rabbit. Izuku nodded. Yeah. I thought it was a bear quirk since that's what the guy I took it from turned into. I haven't had a chance to fool around with it though. Maybe it lets me turn into multiple animals, or maybe it's the animal I'm the most like. Or associate with myself the most. I dunno. He hummed. Have you noticed any changes in your behavior? He asked. Because I'm pretty sure rabbits stomp their back feet when they want attention. He looked down at the box in his hand. I sure hope not, he sighed. But knowing my luck, I'm sure something else will be wrong with me. Back to the topic. Are we loading the truck? Yes, Dad said. We're going to be taking a bunch of stuff over to Toshinori's later today. So load it up with as much as you can. Izuku nodded and walked to the door. As he opened it, he stopped to answer his phone. "It's Shoto, I'm gonna talk to him for a minute. I'll be back." He made eye contact with his dad and motioned to Toshinori, mouthing, "Talk to him," before answering his phone. "Hey Shao-chan, oh, just packing." "Yeah, I'm fine. I've got super strength, after all." The door closed behind Izuku, leaving Hisashi alone with Toshinori. Their eyes met. Well, he had been avoiding the topic for days. Hisashi sat next to him on the couch. "So," he began. "He might be a minute." Hisashi drummed his fingers on his knees. "We should talk about what happened." Toshinori smiled and set down his mug. "Well, I feel I've made myself quite clear. But, I'll say it again to make sure we're on the same page." He turned to Hisashi and took his hands gently. "Hisashi, I love you," he said. "I didn't want to burden you with my feelings, especially when I thought I was going to die." He squeezed his hands. "But I think that was where I was meant to die. But, I didn't. You were there. Izuku had given you blood curdle. Because of you too, I survived when I was meant to die." "Oh." Hisashi began. "So." He nodded. "I was so overjoyed that I lived. That I can live. That my fate has changed. I couldn't resist." He smiled softly. "Unfortunately, I made a brash move and kissed you in front of the world, so I've already painted a target on your back, but I want to be with you. In a relationship. Together. Tosh." He said softly. "You deserve someone better." "That's bullshit," Toshinori said. "And you know it. Either way, I want you." He sighed. I want you too," Hisashi confessed. "I still feel this huge weight of guilt." He looked over at Inko's shrine. "Inko was the love of my life. That woman made me. I mean, I doubt I'd exist at all if it weren't for her. Most of my happiest memories are from her. I know being with you isn't really betraying her. She's dead. There's no one to betray anymore." But looked back at Toshinori. "I was prepared to spend the rest of my life devoted completely to my son. I didn't think I'd get a second chance at love like this." "I understand," Toshinori said. "I never thought I could have love like this in the first place. To me, the world came first. I couldn't ask anyone to be in a relationship like that with me, knowing they would always come after my job." He stroked his massive thumb over Hisashi's hand. "But all might is gone. As much as I hate that I can't protect Izuku anymore, there's a small part of me that's relieved. My life is mine again. I can use my life to be with you and Izuku." He leaned in closer. "Hisashi, please. Allow me to spend my days at your side." Hisashi wanted this. He wanted this so badly. He wanted fuck it. He grabbed Toshinori and pressed their lips together again. The kiss was better than the first one. The way Toshinori made him feel. He hadn't felt this way in years. When they finally pulled apart, he grabbed him by the cheeks and met his deep-set blue eyes. "Stay with me, Toshinori. Always." Chapter 43, Moving In. Chapter by Roxi2Star. "Thanks for the help, Shoto," Izuku said, peering out from behind the massive stack of boxes he was carrying. They were both standing in the elegant elevator on their way to the top floor of Toshinori's apartment building. They were in the process of moving in the last of their belongings. It had been 4 days since they left the hospital, and almost a week since the Kamino ward incident. Izuku would like to say he's coping, but he honestly hadn't been able to sort through his emotions completely. He wasn't sure he ever wanted to. Throwing himself into projects to forget his pain sounded a lot more fun. He has a few. It's no problem. I'm kind of excited about seeing All Might's home, Shoto replied. He wasn't carrying nearly as many boxes as Izuku, but he didn't have super strength. How much have you unpacked? The elevator stopped, opening with a ding. Not much. We haven't even slept here yet, so tonight will be the first time, he said, gently nudging Shoto's leg with his foot. You can help me break in the new bed. Toshinori bought me a queen-sized one since the room is bigger. Shoto rolled his eyes, saying, I'm pretty sure your dad will still want me to sleep on a spare futon. I mean, yeah, Izuku acknowledged. But we can still do stuff in it, though. They reached All Might's apartment door, and Izuku held the boxes in one hand, leaning against the door for balance. He opened the already unlocked door and regripped the boxes. Okay, Dad, I got the last of the stuff labeled kitchen. Great, set it on the counter. Dad's voice called from somewhere deeper inside. Xiaodo stepped in after him, saying, "Oh wow, this place is beautiful." All Might's apartment was huge, with an open concept, large windows that allowed in an abundance of sunlight, nice and comfortable living room furniture, a large glass fireplace, a very large TV, and a well-equipped kitchen off to one side, complete with a bar and stools, a massive island, and state-of-the-art appliances. There was a hallway leading to more rooms and a glass sliding door to the balcony area. Izuku grinned and set his stack of boxes down, saying, "I can't believe Toshinori still says he likes our apartment better. I mean, I do too, but that's for sentimental reasons. Though this place is putting up a hell of a battle for the coolest apartment." "Oh, Xiaodo, there's a small gym room and a hot tub on the patio." Xiaodo placed his stack down, saying, "It's rather impressive. I think the others will agree. Wanna see my room?" Izuku asked with a grin, already pulling Xiaodo by the hand. "It's still mostly in boxes, but I put on my new sheets." He dragged Xiaodo to his room in the back. "Are they All Might themed too?" Xiaodo asked. Izuku rolled his eyes and opened the door to his new bedroom. No, the sheets were not All Might themed. The room was large, not quite as large as Xiaodo's. In the middle of the room was the bed, made up with green and black sheets, with Izuku's blue plus ultra body pillow laid on it. There was a new dark wood desk in the room, covered in boxes, an open closet, a box of clothes in front of it, and freshly painted dark blue walls that made the room feel warm and cozy. "Ta-da! It's nice," Xiaodo said as he moved closer to the bed, running his hand along the sheets. Izuku grinned at his boyfriend and tackled him onto the bed. "Oof!" Xiaodo exclaimed in surprise. They landed together in a pile of limbs, with Izuku wrapping his arms under Xiaodo's body and keeping him pinned to the bed. "Izuku!" Xiaodo protested. Izuku untangled them, sitting up on his knees next to Xiaodo on the bed, and said, "Sorry, I couldn't resist. I just had to touch you." He made a sort of grabby hands motion at him. "I missed you so much." Xiaodo smiled and pushed himself into Izuku's space, their arms wrapping around each other, with Izuku flopping his body weight back into him, burying his face in Xiaodo's neck. He smiled, running his fingers through Izuku's mop of green curls. Izuku made a few soft chirps at the sensation of cool fingers. "I missed you too," he said softly. "It's been crazy at the house. Endeavor went off the deep end after All Might retired." "I don't doubt it," Izuku said and pressed a kiss to Xiaodo's neck. He shivered under his touch. "No one likes winning by default," he chuckled softly, his lips ghosting up to the lobe of Xiaodo's ear. "Doesn't matter. You're here now," he said and gently nibbled on him. "I love you, Xiaodo." "NGH." Xiaodo gasped, "I love you so much," his arms tightened around his waist. "I love you." A new territory for them. They'd been dating for 3 months. Xiaodo knew all of the family's secrets. Izuku was relieved about that. It would have been hard to lie to him after using the L word. Izuku pulled out of his neck to instead pull Xiaodo into a lazy kiss. Their lips melted together. It made his stomach do flips. Izuku wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to kiss Xiaodo again for a minute there, back in Kamino. So he relished in the kisses now. The comfort they brought, the feeling of pleasure. The heat that pooled in his gut. The goosebumps that rose on his scarred skin. All of it was precious. All of it could be snatched away in an instant. That was what Izuku learned this summer. Anything could happen at any moment. The only thing he could be certain of was what he was doing was the moment itself. Tomorrow could bring doom. There was only now. And right now, he was licking the inside of Xiaodo's mouth like it was his favorite treat, enjoying the way his boyfriend's body felt under his hands. Xiaodo's own hands were gripping the back of his shirt, pulling at the material as their chests rubbed together. A loud slam from somewhere else made them jump apart. "Damn it, Tosh, what did I tell you about carrying the heavy boxes?" Dad's voice reached their ears. "Are you all right?" Toshinori only laughed. "Hisashi, I'm perfectly fine. I managed to get it up here, didn't I? Just lost my grip is all." Izuku sighed and stood. He closed the door. "Probably shouldn't get too heated," he said, disappointment radiating from his body. "You're still spending the night, right?" "As long as I'm welcome," Xiaodo said. "Should we start unpacking?" I can help you. He smiled softly and held out his left hand to Izuku. His eyes had landed on the brand new burn scar along the outside of Shado's left arm. Don't worry, Shado said, gently rubbing the scar. It was my own fault. I lost control of my fire at the camp. My fault, Izuku said. If I had just been paying attention. If I hadn't insisted we go help Tokoyami. Shado grabbed him and pulled him back onto the bed. You are not at fault for being kidnapped, he grabbed Izuku's face between his hands. Listen to me, what happened to you was in no way your fault. I'm the one who didn't protect you. If I hadn't let go of your hand, Compress would have just gotten you too, Izuku cut him off. Those villains were going to stop at nothing to get you, he said. You can't blame yourself for being a victim. It's the fault of the people who let it happen. I wasn't strong enough to stop them. But I won't be next time. If I ever see Shigaraki, or any of them ever again, I'll... Izuku kissed him. No more talking about it, he said softly. Don't want to think about it, he bit his lip. Any word from Tuya? Shado shook his head. Nothing yet. I was hoping you'd heard from him. No, Izuku sighed. He said he'd be in touch. I guess there isn't much we can do about it right now, he leaned his head on Shado's shoulder. He was kind to me, he admitted. Well, kinder. He was the only one who cared if I was fed or had water, which I suppose is the basic level of care, but none of the others even noticed. Shigaraki seemed to completely forget. It was like I was a pet goldfish or something. Shado pulled him close to his chest. You're safe now. I know. He mumbled softly. I am. They stayed like that for a few minutes before Izuku pulled back. Let's get to unpacking, he said. I can do my clothes later, but in here, aha. He grinned and grabbed a shopping bag from a small pile of other bags. I left most of my All Might stuff back at the apartment. Feels weird decorating my room with All Might now that he and Dad are dating. So I decided to branch out, he grinned and let the contents of it fall onto the bed, posters. At least a dozen of them. They were of various heroes. One was of Best Jeanist posed perfectly in front of a blue background. Another was of Hawks, his wings outstretched as the sun set behind his head, giving him a halo of light. Even a mildly sexy one of Mount Lady. Really, Izuku, a Mount Lady sexy poster? He asked, holding it up in distaste. Izuku snatched it back, his face pink. She's very cool. He wasn't meeting Shado's eye. I just think she's neat, and her quirk is so useful, and... It's fine, Shado said. You're allowed to think other people are attractive, especially celebrities and heroes. I think other people are attractive. Though I'm not the type for posters. I don't mind that you are. Although Izuku didn't miss the mild glare he sent the posters' way. Once we go pro and you get merch, you know damn well I'll be buying all of it. I'll have a whole wall of Shado posters. Especially the sexy ones. Izuku grinned. He sputtered, I will not be having sexy posters of any kind, he said. You won't need the posters. You'll have the real thing. Can't pin you up on a wall, and, well, I suppose I can pin you on a wall, he gave a mischievous grin. Before Izuku could continue to harass his boyfriend, his phone went off in his pocket. He checked it, revealing a text from Shinsu. Hey, I got the stuff. What time should we be there? Right. The rest of their friends were stopping by to see the new apartment. Izuku smiled at the message. Bless Shinsu. He'd taken his assignment in stride. He quickly replied the time before turning back to Shado. Everyone else is gonna be here in like an hour. Let's try and get some of this done. He pressed a kiss to his cheek and they got to work. They actually managed to get quite a bit of work finished. Several boxes were now unpacked, and hero posters started to cover the walls. Izuku and Shado both stood at the edge of the bed, admiring their handiwork. I think it looks nice, Izuku said. Yeah, though I do miss the single-mindedness of your old room, he said. But this is nice too. Izuku grinned up at him. It was nice decorating with you. Very domestic, he said, hooking his finger around one of Shado's belt loops to pull him closer. Makes me think about living with you, he said. Decorating our shared space, making you tea in the morning, coming home to the same space. That does sound nice, Shado said softly, turning to face him properly. I'd love to live with you, Bunny. Izu. Dad called. Your friends are here. The squad arrives, Izuku joked. Come on. He pulled Shoto out of his room and into the living room. Shinsu, Okiko, and Ida were all standing in the living room. Ida was quietly admiring the decor, while Shinsu and Okiko were shocked. Okiko, in particular, seemed about ready to froth at the mouth. Hey, guys. Izuku greeted. What do you think? It's so fancy. Okiko cried. It's huge, Deku-kun. I can't believe you're rich now. He chuckled. I'm not. Toshinori is, he said simply. Shinsu-kun, you said you had the goods. He asked his friend. He finally closed his mouth, having been rendered slack-jawed. Why yet? He held up his beat-up black backpack. It's not a ton, but I figure since we have a first-timer, and Ida apparently doesn't have much experience either. He opened the backpack and fished out his Switch. I figure some Mario Party would be a good way to start off. One of us will have to sit out, though. Perfect. Izuku cried. Together they quickly set up the Switch to the TV. They all spread out on the couches. Izuku and Shoto curled up in a corner together, Ida sitting by himself in a comfy chair, Okiko sitting on the other side of the couch, and Shinsu, who'd curled up on the soft rug on the floor. He was setting up their game of Mario Party. Izuku had elected to sit the first one out. At some point, Dad and Toshinori wandered into the living room. You kids are lucky. I convinced Akira to deliver here, he said. Usual orders, I take it. He asked the group. The kids all gave affirmative responses. Katsuden, Tosh. He asked Toshinori, who'd just leaned against the back of the couch. Thank you, he said with a nod. So, what do you think of the place, kids? It's so pretty, All Might. Yagi-san. Okiko said. What should we call you now actually? Toshinori chuckled. You can call me whatever you like, he said. Yagi-san, All Might, even Toshinori if you'd prefer. Though at school, I'd prefer All Might or Yagi-sensei, he said. But when you're guests in my home, I don't mind something more familiar. Okiko's face turned pink. I think I'd die if I called you by your given name, she said honestly. He laughed harder this time. Whatever makes you the most comfortable, he said before pushing away from the couch. He and Dad retreated into the kitchen to talk quietly. Izuku watched them out of the corner of his eye. They sat at the kitchen island, their legs pressed together. Izuku smiled softly. They deserved happiness like that. Izuku turned himself back to the TV. They'd finally gotten the game started. Shinsu had called dibs on Waluigi, Okiko had nabbed Yoshi, Ida taking Mario, and Shoto picked Peach. His only response was I like pink. Shoto didn't really get Mario Party. He still seemed to enjoy himself, though, even if he came in dead last in every mini-game. Ida hadn't fared much better, though he did seem to get the hang of it by the last few turns. It really came down to Shinsu and Okiko. They'd gone back and forth for the lead the whole game. In the end, it came down to the bonus stars. Yes. Okiko cried. Take that, Shinsu. She grinned and reached down, fluffing his already messy hair. Get absolutely wrecked. Shinsu laughed but grabbed her wrist and pulled her off the couch onto the floor with him. Oi, if you're gonna ruffle the hair, be prepared to get yours ruffled in return, he said and began to mess up her cute little bob. She giggled madly. Izuku chuckled, pushing into Shoto a bit more. Ida watched their exchange, his eyes narrowing somewhat as they roughhoused. Izuku watched his eyes. They kept to Okiko's form as she thrashed in Shinsu's hold, the two of them laughing all the while. What's that about? Did Ida get into a fight with one of them? Unless... maybe he was jealous? He tried to make eye contact with Shoto, but his lovely boyfriend still had his eyes on the screen. Food's here, Dad announced, interrupting Izuku's thoughts as to who Ida might be jealous of. I'm gonna go down to the lobby and get it. Need help carrying? Izuku asked as he untangled himself from Shoto. He shook his head. No need, just get everyone around the table, he said. I'll be back. And with that, Dad left. You heard him. Izuku said with a smile. I'm starving. He stood and stretched his arms above his head. Soon, they all sat around the dinner table, each of them with their favorite dish from Akira's. Izuku had stolen a few bites from Shoto's bowl. Cold soba was really starting to grow on him. Whatever had been bothering Ida seemed to have dissipated as he sat next to Okako while they ate. Both of them were laughing quietly. Shinsu and Dad were engaged in a conversation across from Izuku. Dad had really taken a liking to Shinsu, especially since Shinsu had saved his life. Izuku really had to think of a way to pay Shinsu back for that. Shoto slipped his hand down to gently squeeze Izuku's knee. Izuku smiled at him and took another bite of katsudon. Wait. Didn't Shinsu have a crush on Kaminari? Oh, that's something he could work with. He found love at UA, why couldn't Shinsu? Though it wasn't like he and Shoto's romantic getting together could be replicated. They shared passionate kisses in a hospital bed after narrowly escaping death. Izuku couldn't exactly go around manufacturing ways for that to happen. At least, not legally. He chewed thoughtfully. Maybe he should do some research. Kaken had a whole stash of shoujo manga, though he'd die before he'd admit that to anyone but Izuku. Maybe he should borrow a few for ideas. You okay, Bun? Shoto asked quietly. Oh yeah. I'm fine. He said. Just thinking too hard. I'll tell you about it later. Soon, it was time for most of the crew to leave. Dad walked all of them back down to the lobby and made sure they had rides. Izuku and Shoto, meanwhile, sat on the couch as a movie played in the background. Toshinori was in the chair beside them, typing away at his laptop. Kids are all safe and on their ways home, Dad said, closing the door to the apartment behind him and locking it. Whatcha working on, Tosh? He asked, strolling towards them. He leaned a knee on the armrest of Toshinori's chair. Just an email from Netsu. We have another faculty meeting at the school tomorrow, he said. You should have gotten one too. Dad sighed. I did. I haven't had a chance to read it over, but I will. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not really looking forward to it, though. I made a complete ass of myself at the last meeting. Toshinori shook his head. It was entirely understandable. Honestly, had I not been focused on being there for you, I would have done a lot of the same. Izuku frowned, sitting up to look at his dad. What happened at the last meeting? I punched Izuku in the face. Both Izuku and Shoto gasped. Dad. Izuku cried. Why did you do that? His father had a dark look on his face. I trusted him with you. He let you get kidnapped. Relax, he said. I'm not mad still. I know that All for One was going to do everything in his power to get you. Izuku was spread thin, and your whereabouts were unknown. There wasn't much more he could have done, he blushed. I'm gonna apologize when I see him. Toshinori smiled. He's going to forgive you, he said, standing from his chair. I promise. But, it's getting late. I'm gonna turn in. Dad smiled softly. Thanks. Night, love you, they shared a quick kiss. Good night. Night, boys. Night. Izuku said as Shoto gave a small wave. Toshinori left the room, and Dad slipped into his empty spot. He pulled out his phone, obviously going through his own emails. So, Shoto began. What's on your mind? Izuku blinked. Oh, from dinner? Well, it's a bit silly, he played with the hem of his shirt. But I was trying to think of something nice we can do for Shinso-kun. I mean, you all came to rescue me, and I definitely want to repay everyone, but if it weren't for Shinso-kun, Dad would have been taken. All Might have lost the fight, and, well, who knows what would have happened without him. Oh, Shoto nods. I see. That's not silly. Actually, I'd love to help you with that. Do you have something in mind? I do. Izuku mumbled. That's the silly part. I think I want to set him up with Kaminari-kun. Shoto hummed. I can see it. They'd make a very nice pairing. Opposites attract, right? He asked. How should we go about this? Well, actually, do they like each other? Izuku gave Shoto a look. Alright, but does Shinso like Kaminari back? Izuku's look only intensified. Oh, stop, Shoto poked his side. I'm not as good at reading people as you are. Look, okay, so they like each other. How do we help them? This doesn't seem like something that can be forced. Just let them figure it out, Dad said. Ah damn, this meeting is at 7 AM? I gotta get to bed, kids. Izuku, did you ever find the guest futon? No. I actually didn't. I checked though. We might have left it behind. I don't think Tosh has one either, Dad heaved a great sigh. Look. Look at me. Both of you, he held their gazes. I am trusting you too, okay? Please make smart choices. Remember Izuku, I am just as, if not more observant than you. If there's funny business, I assure you I will know about it, and I will embarrass you more than I am currently doing right now. Do you understand? They both nod, very pink in the face. I'm glad we understand each other. Night, boys, he said as he left the room. Ugh, sorry about that Shoto, Izuku sighed. It's fine, Shoto said. I understand. But at least we can sleep together, he smiled softly. That's my favorite part anyway. Just holding you. Izuku giggled. You're such a sap, he nuzzled his nose on his cheek. Good thing I like sappy. So. Any ideas for our new project? He asked. I need a good project. I'm thinking we should call it Operation Shinkami. Shoto hummed. I had a plan on how to ask you out before the whole hero killer incident, he said. I was going to see if you liked me back and then plan a confession. I hadn't picked a location yet, but I really only had like a week from figuring out my feelings to you kissing me in the hospital. Hey, I felt your heart pounding. I had to shoot my shot. We can't force them together, but I think if we assist Shinso by creating openings for him to confess, he hummed. Like if we start inviting Kaminari out with us as a group, then we ditch them. That's a great idea. Izuku said. Kaken and Kaminari-kun are friends. If we make it a group outing with them, it'll be less suspicious than just straight up asking Kaminari-kun. Oh. What about the amusement park? We can make it part of healing your inner child. A two birds with one stone situation. Oh wait, 3. Kaken has a crush on Kirishima-kun. Maybe we can work on them too. Shoto blinked. Bakugo likes Kirishima? That's... Hey. Did he tell you that or is this you guessing? No, Kaken told me. I told him I had a crush on you, and he told me about his on Kirishima-kun. Izuku smiled up at him. So that's what we'll do. We can plan an amusement park triple date. Except the other two couples don't know it's a date. Shoto chuckled softly, shaking his head. Sounds like a plan, he checked the time. It is rather late. Should we go to bed? He asked. Yeah, probably, Izuku sighed and sagged into his boyfriend's arms. Come on then, Tiger, he stood up and pulled Shoto up with him. They walked to the bedroom hand in hand. I'm gonna make you wear the amusement park's cat ears and take so many pictures of you in them. I look forward to it. In the morning, Izuku woke up with Shoto's head on his chest and his heart full. He pet Shoto's soft hair as the morning light filtered through his bedroom window. This was nice. He still saw the horrors of All for One when he was alone, but he wasn't alone now, was he? It was like Shoto chased all his bad dreams away. He smiled. One of their phones was going off. Shoto stirred. That me or you? He asked, his voice sleep-heavy. Izuku gently leaned over to the nightstand. Their two phones sat plugged in. Izuku's in a gaudy all-might case, and Shoto's in a simple black one. Yours, he said and grabbed it. He checked the caller ID and it read dumpster fire. It's your dad. Want me to ignore it? No. Shoto yawned. I'll take it. He grabbed the phone and answered. What the hell do you want? It's early, he snapped. Izuku could hear Endeavor's voice through the phone, but not his actual words. Okay, good for you. He paused. No. I'm not doing that. No, go fuck yourself. Yes, he's here. No, I won't let you talk to him. Izuku rolled his eyes and took the phone right out of Shoto's hand. What's up, consolation prize? Izuku said into the phone. Midoriya. Good. My first day off since the Kamino incident is coming up in a few days. Shoto has just informed me of your relationship. Our interactions have been short and rather unpleasant, but you're important to my son, and therefore I want to get to know you. Come over for dinner. Well, that wasn't what Izuku was expecting. Hold on a sec, Endeavor, he put the phone down on his chest. He wants me to come over for dinner. Yes, I know, Xiaodo sighed. I told him to go fuck himself. I wouldn't mind so much, Izuku said. Sounds like he's really trying to make a change for you. Not that you have to forgive him or anything. Besides, I'd like to see your siblings again, and I get to disrespect Endeavor in his own home? Sounds great to me. Weren't you just saying he's trying to make a positive change in himself? Izuku grinned. So? Who said I had to make it easy on him? Xiaodo rolled his eyes. That a yes then. Do what you want. He picked the phone back up. Good news, I've decided to grace your home with my presence, he said. Just have Xiaodo text me the details. See ya soon. Listen here, boy, just because. Izuku hung up the phone. Then his own phone buzzed on the table. Xiaodo reached over. It's a text from your dad, he said. I guess they're at the meeting at UA. He took his phone and handed Xiaodo back his. He opened up the message and read it out loud. UA is increasing security again. Oh my god. He said. They're building dorm rooms. Staying in them will be mandatory for the time being. Oh my god, Xiaodo. We're going to be living at UA. Together. Izuku grinned before he realized something. Ah, damn it. I just moved. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.